morning. We're having Congressman McKinley join us soon. I don't see him yet. Is he?
We were on. There we are.
Oh, there you are. Great. Good morning, Congressman McKinley. Thank you so much for joining us today. Before we begin, we want to take a moment to thank you for your support of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill. We know that was not an easy vote, and both the U.S. Chamber and our friends at the West Virginia Chamber greatly appreciate your support on an extremely important bill. And so much so that we decided to fly an airplane over the West Virginia football game a couple weeks ago to show our appreciation. So we hope you saw that, and thanks again.
Certainly, I saw that. I've not missed a football game in 40 years at Mountaineer Stadium, so we were able to see that. And it was well received by the crowd.
Terrific. That's good to hear. Well, we just heard from Acting Administrator Goffman about EPA's plans to reduce methane through regulations on new and existing sources. We also know that a methane fee was included in the House-passed reconciliation bill that is now under consideration in the Senate. What are your views on these two approaches and on the challenges of methane more broadly? And how could West Virginia's growing natural gas industry be impacted?
Well, let's take them apart, I guess, and you're right, the time's short on this. I think I heard you ask essentially two questions. The first, let's deal with the natural gas tax. What I would be suggesting is that I think that this administration has to realize we're in the early stages of winter. And we're gonna see increased prices. Gas prices right now, according to EIA, are at a 7-year high across this country, 7-year high. So as a result, they've done the math, and they're suggesting that they, because of those higher costs, we're going to be spending about 30% more for energy this winter. That's bad enough on consumers headed into this, but then to impose a new tax on top of that at this time. That the American Gas Association is predicting that if the imposition of this new tax would actually add about 30% more cost to the consumer. So they're already paying 30-some percent, and now the American Gas is at 34%. So the combination of those two is crippling to families right now. So I think the question should be on is timing. The cost you're saying could be $9 billion more. We talked to a small propane operator over in the Eastern Panhandle, West Virginia, that they're already saying that for them, propane is last winter would be about $1,400 for heating for a family. And now this year, they're already predicting $2,000 on it. So then if you add this tax on top of that, it's just going to be harder for families to make ends meet. Now let's pivot to the second part of your question, which is the methane regulation. I'm very aware. I'm one of just 2 engineers in Congress that have dealt with issues like this. So I don't have a problem with imposing some form of regulation or control over our methane emissions. I think it needs to be done, but it should be done in a bipartisan fashion. And that's not what's happened right now. If you get buy-in from the Republicans on one that has hearings, we got input from it, amendments, changes, or whatever it might be on a regulation, I think you're going to have more support for it as a regulation if it's got buy-in from the Republican Party as well.
Sure, and that leads me to my next question. We know your independence and leadership as a legislator extends to energy and climate issues as well. And as a conservative Republican from a major energy state, you have made an important mark on this debate by pursuing durable bipartisan solutions. So as it pertains to methane, do you see common ground or opportunities to address methane emissions from oil and gas in a manner that makes sense for industry and the environment alike?
Well, I certainly hope we can find a bipartisan issue. I've staked my career both in the business sector and as well in Congress in working in bipartisan fashion. We're not always going to get it our own way. We just talked about the gas tax. If you just bought into that, have more people have input into it, I think we have a better shot. So I'm counting, yes, there is a bipartisan solution with this. We're seeing already in a bipartisan fashion, we're seeing Nettle working on some solutions that might be able to address this methane. Nettle happens to have a large operation in my district in Morgantown, West Virginia, and they're trying to find ways of doing some retrofit for some legacy components with it. Their technology on real-time data. I can go on. There are 3 or 4 things that right now they're working on that could be innovation. using innovation could help solve the methane problem. We've also got a technical company, TMC2, that happens to be located in Fairmont, West Virginia. They've already used this technology on methane emissions in China, in the ports in China, and it's worked very effectively. What our office is trying to do is help coordinate that with the Homeland Security and maybe DOE back here in America to try to use that same technology of doing that. So are there chances of bipartisanship? Of course there are. And I didn't wind up being the 10th most bipartisan member of Congress. I'm so proud of my office to be able to coordinate with other offices across the Capitol so that we can get some things done. And this is one that we need to get done, is somehow come up with something about this methane, because we all know the problem. We know it's either 20 to 80 times, depending upon which chart you look to it, is more dangerous as a greenhouse gas and what it's doing to our atmosphere. So let's work on it. I think we can. And I believe we can work across the aisle and come up with a solution to it. So I'm optimistic. There are enough promising technologies and innovation that already show this is going to work.
Terrific. So you touched on this a little bit, but you and fellow Republicans have been very vocal on the issue of inflation, and specifically the influence of energy prices on consumers' wallets. While natural gas prices are up significantly in the U.S. over the past year, the increases here pale in comparison to the EU and China, which are faced with record high prices and potential winter supply shortages. Meanwhile, from an environmental perspective, President Biden has repeatedly asked OPEC to increase oil production, even though it is well known that most OPEC countries have significantly more methane emissions per unit of production than the U.S. How should we factor inflation, the global energy crisis, and emission disparities among energy producing nations into our strategy to address methane emissions?
Well, from a congressional standpoint, we just need to go back to where we have what maybe I'm talking down in the weeds on this thing, is talking about regular order, where we have bills come before the committee, we're allowed to amend them, we have hearings, we get good testimony, we get markups, we have debate. I think it's going to come up with good solutions that where we can address this. Look, I think the realization has to be that people have to understand we were energy independent just in 2019. We need to get back to that, because I believe in my heart that a lot of this inflation issue is all driven by supply. If we can get more of our supply, the natural gas into the market, you're going to see less heating costs for the winter. You're going to have more manufacturing that we can do this. So I think it's important to increase the supply. And keep it in mind that our gas that we use in America is cleaner than it is in others. Even the tar sands from Canada are very heavy in pollution. That we know that the greenhouse gases from the Russian gas is about 40% worse than they are in America. So for us to be able to do this and to reduce inflation and the impact it could have on emissions is use more American gas. It's cleaner. So the idea of being able to build our pipelines from places like West Virginia, that's the 5th highest producing gas in America, behind Texas and Oklahoma. You can go on from there, but it's one of the higher ones. To pipe that to the East Coast so that we can put LNG into ships and send it over to Europe, I think those are possibilities that where we'll see we can reduce the emissions in other countries if they would use cleaner American gas with it. So I don't agree with some of the solutions that have been proposed by this administration, trying to increase the supply by going to the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, tapping 50 billion barrels. That just is a 3-day supply. That's not a solution. That might gin up your base and maybe make some people happy about that tap, but that's not the long-term answer. I think our long-term solution is going to be through innovation and increase the supply and go back to where we were as an energy independent nation, and so that we can export to other countries and export our technology to other nations so that they can improve their emission standards as well. We had a discussion this morning with Aspen about how is China going to reduce its emissions? And they said not on their own, but if we develop in America the technology to reduce their emissions in China, perhaps using trade and other diplomacy, we might be able to get them to reduce their emissions as well.
Great, and thank you, Congressman McKinley. We're running a little short on time, but we really do appreciate you joining us here today and providing your insight.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.